All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another FTL tier list. Nobody thought it could be done, but I am back with the FTL enemy ship layout tier lists. I have meticulously combed the actual game's files to come up with all of the types of enemy ships that are in the game, with a few exceptions, which we'll get into. Ignore this is disgusting. Just ignore that. Don't worry about that. But I have compiled all of the enemy ships in the game, and we're going to be going through how annoying they are to fight, how easy they are, or how difficult. Keep in mind, this is highly up to RNG because, like, one ship might have just a mini beam, and then that same ship layout later on might have, a burst laser Mark II, two flaks, a halberd, and I hope you like dying if you find that thing. So a lot of it depends, and I'm doing this more just for fun, man. Everybody loves tier lists. So we're gonna be going through these real quick before I start. I'm thinking of making a Spearman's Discord channel. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know in the comments. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I think that could be fun. Talk about FTL, roguelites, just hang out if you guys want. So let me know if you're into that, and I'll consider it. But yeah, let's just get into this. So I'm just going to point out a few things about this. We're going to be going down the list as the wiki has it. And the way it works is every ship, well, not every ship, but most ships have a secondary version of themselves that was added in Advanced Edition, which is the same, except it has usually like hacking and a clone bay instead of a med bay and doors. So they're a little different, and they technically have a different name. For example, this is the Crystal Bomber. This is also the Crystal Instigator. They look exactly the same. They just have slightly different systems. So we're going to kind of talk about that, but not really. It's more just kind of the basic idea. But like I said, we're going to be going down wiki order. S tier. Well, how do we do this? S tier is probably like super easy, I guess, or you love to see it. And then D tier is like it's impossible and super hard for what it's worth. So we'll probably run with that. So speaking of the Crystal Bomber, that is our first one. Pretty rare most of the time, but if you do find these, they can be a little bit threatening. Their crystal weapons tend to be quite a big deal. If they get hostile towards you, it can be pretty dangerous. This is the bigger variant. This one down here is the Crystal Scout, which is a little bit lighter. It has 2 to 3 crystal crew members, whereas this one has 2 to 5 crew members. So it does depend. They cannot have hacking, but this variant here can have cloaking, which can be pretty dangerous. So I'm going to be honest, this is not something you really want to run into and have to fight. Depending on how many shield layers you have, it could be a big problem with their piercing. And if they have 4, crystal weapons, you could be in a lot of trouble. So I think this is kind of, it's near the bottom. We'll put it in C tier for now. The Crystal Scout is not nearly as bad. It's smaller. Looking at the image of the rooms that I have up here, it doesn't have very many rooms. It's very tiny. So beam weapons do pretty good damage against it. And again, they're pretty rare, but not even counting that, it only has 6 to 14 hull strength, which is really not so bad. So it's a mid-tier ship. The pierce weapons can be a problem depending on your setup, but otherwise it's not really that bad. The other thing with the bomber here, is it can have teleporters, and crystals boarding you can be pretty annoying. They're kind of like rocks. So we'll keep that in mind, and I think I'm okay with that. Moving on, we got the NG ships. So this is the NG Scout. It is tiny. And then this is the NG Bomber, which can be pretty threatening. So let's start with the Scout. The Scout is not that bad. It pretty much always has drone control, which, depending on your build, can be a big problem. But in base FTL, a lot of times they'll just have like an anti-drone drone, or they'll have like something kind of useless like that. So it's not really that big a deal. I will say the NGs inside, there's 2 to 5 NGs, and they can repair pretty efficiently. So it can make taking them down a bit problematic, but only having a couple weapons at best usually is not really that bad, because NGs tend to focus on drones. So I'm going to put this in A tier. If you find one of these, it's usually not that bad. Yeah, they're repairing it quickly, but realistically, they don't have much to fire back with since they have so much of their resources invested in drones. So unless you're a drone heavy run, or like relying on missiles and they have a defense drone, you could have problems. But if you're just running a laser build with a beam, a defense drone is meaningless to you. This one, on the other hand, the bomber, can be a little bit of a problem. It can also come as the NG Hacker variant, which, as you might guess, has hacking. And if you get that hacker variant plus the drone control it has, if it has like some defense mark 2s or like a system repair, this thing can be kind of a nightmare to fight. The virus event usually comes in this one, I think. So it can be pretty difficult. I think it's not the worst because, again, if you're not relying on... Like, certain strategies are walled hard by this, but certain other ones aren't. So I think it depends quite a bit. But this is definitely not something you really want to fight against. They can be quite difficult. But since it's pretty build specific, I'm not going to rate it too much lower than that. So the other thing to consider is each ship has its own augment usually. I didn't actually touch on this. So these guys have the crystal... whatever it's Crystal Vengeance, which can be bad. Again, it depends how often like that actually procs, because if it doesn't, then you're mostly fine. But yeah, I don't know. Do they even have the? They might not even actually have. I don't know. Well, the NG ones definitely have the Medbot dispersal. That's been proven here. But actually, now that I'm looking at it, I don't think the Crystal ones have that. So forget that whole tangent. But these guys do have Medbot dispersal, so it doesn't really save NGs. You know, they're still pretty frail when you board them, if that's really going to be your thing. But keep that in mind if you are coming up against it. Okay, and that, I believe, is NGs done with. Now, the Federation ships here, these are Federation ships that have been taken over by pirates, essentially just your run-of-the-mill pirate ships. Most other types of ships, as you can see, here's the Slug, here's the Slug Pirate, Rebel Pirate, whatever, have pirate variants, which are almost identical. After reading this, they're not really actually that different. The biggest change is the crew. Other than that, they're actually pretty much the same. So we'll touch on that in a moment, but these are designated pirate ones. This is the Federation Scout / Pirate Scout, and it doesn't have anything special at all. So these ships are actually usually really weak. And if you have a beam, you can hit a ton of rooms with this. So I'm going to put this in S tier. These ships are pretty trash most of the time. That's kind of like, you know, you won't really have too much trouble going against this. This is the classic ship that has like a mini beam and then a burst laser Mark 1, and they just can't hurt you with level 2 shields. So it's not really bad. And they usually only have 2 to 3 human crews, but it could be random. So it kind of depends for boarding strats, because pirate crews tend to be random. But otherwise, really not that bad. The Outrider variant, which is the Advanced Edition one, can have hacking, but it's optional, so it's not necessarily the case. And the AI in base FTL hacks pretty stupid-ass systems most of the time, so this thing I don't think is really that bad. Moving on to the Pirate Bomber here, which is this one. Can be a little bit more dangerous, but still, they don't really have anything crazy. If you get the hacker variant, again, it has hacking, and that can be a problem. But realistically, it has no other systems. It can't have boarding or anything, no drones, anything like that, from what I'm seeing here. So it's not so bad. And the beam layout, or the room layout rather, is kind of like it's the one that's got rooms here, and then the weapons room is like on one of these sides here. It's got the big ass shield room in the middle, and the pilot's up here, obviously. So you can hit quite a few rooms with it. A pike beam does wonders. A halberd beam does as well. There's a lot of overlap. You can hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rooms, and then 6 with a pike beam easily. So this thing is not that bad either. I'm going to put it in A tier. We should probably just rename these, actually. Let's do that on the spot here. Easy to fight. This will be somewhat easy to fight. This one will be mid tier, I guess. Hard, and then like avoid if possible. There we go. Those are our new tiers. So now you guys got a better image of that. So yeah, the pirate ships, these are the basic ones, are not that bad. I really don't think they're that big of a deal. And they don't have any like augments, hidden augments or anything. Now, moving on to the Lanius ships. These ones are pretty dangerous. So I couldn't find in the files, I couldn't find this one, man. This is the Lanius Bomber. So I had to take the cringe image off of the wiki. But you guys get the idea, whatever. Obviously, these ones don't have oxygen. So boarding strats are almost completely ineffective unless you have your own Lanius. It's not going to work out very well for that. The room layouts, I mean, you can kind of see one here. A lot of empty rooms that don't really help you too much with most beams in most contexts. And of course, Lanius and flak go hand in hand. So they tend to have flak weapons, which obviously are terrible. Whereas the Lanius Bomber has crew teleporting by default 100% of the time. So that's just a pain in the ass. optional systems, it can have a cloaking or mind control or both, depending on how unlucky you are and how late in the game you are. So absolutely avoid these. These are a nightmare. These Lanius bombers will ruin you. Plus they have emergency respirators, which doesn't really matter, but still not ideal. The smaller ones, the Lanius scouts, aren't quite as bad. They don't have boarding, but they can possibly have hacking, so it can make it a little bit difficult, but they're not nearly as bad. I'm going to put them in hard just because of this, mostly the same reasons. Boarding doesn't work. The room layout is like whatever. Tends to have flak, tends to have missiles, so it can be kind of annoying. Not nearly as bad, but definitely hard. Compared to like something like this, dude, like you don't want to fight these if you don't have to. And that kind of ties in with the, as we've rated in all my other tier lists, Lanius sectors are just a pain in your ass 90% of the time. Okay, so moving on to the Mantis ships now. We're going to start with the Mantis Scout, which is this one / Pirate Scout. Again, they're mostly the same. Pretty much the only difference is the pirate crew is random. But yeah, other than that, yeah, they look almost the same. The Mantis Scout, this one, can have door control, potentially, and this one can't. That's almost meaningless in most contexts, so it doesn't really matter. Other than that, they're pretty much identical. And again, the loot on them is completely random, so this ship might have crap one time you fight them, and then amazing weapons the other time. Making this list, I was actually surprised how few ship types there are. Because of the way that the weapons and like loot RNG, what they have, works, it feels like there's so many more, but there's really not that many. I'm surprised. Which is awesome that they made you get that impression. So, having said that, on these ones, the teleporter is actually not guaranteed. It is an optional system, so you might not even find teleporters on these, as I'm sure you guys have noticed. And without the teleporters, these things tend to be kind of bad. They're pretty small, and their weapons, I mean, they can have whatever, but I'm going to put them in mid-tier. I don't think they're that bad. If they have boarding, they can be a little more annoying, depending on the weapons again, but if you get lucky with the weapons, these are pretty solidly mid-tier, I'd say. Okay. Now, if you... Let's see, what are we looking at next here? I suppose... Yeah, okay. I was looking at the wiki, and the Advanced Edition ones are pretty much the same. Is there even any difference, really? It has less crew. Yeah, I don't know. They're pretty much the same. So moving on to the Mantis Fighter / the Pirate Fighter, which is kind of the mid-level one for the Mantis race. This one will guaranteed have boarding. So if you find one of these, you're going to get boarded. And that can be a problem depending on how defensive you are crew-wise. These are definitely way worse than these. They can hold quite a few more weapons, and they can cause a lot more trouble for you. They still only usually have the 2-man boarding room, which is good. Once we get to this one right here, we're going to get the big boarding rooms, potentially at least. It depends on the layout, of course, but I think these ones are probably harder just because they guarantee to have boarding. Usually, though, I will say, now that I'm thinking about it, the weapons, to compensate for the boarding, the weapons tend to be kind of garbage on these ships. But I still think they're going to sit kind of around here. This list, again, is mostly just for fun. It's kind of hard to rate these things to begin with, but we're having a good time here. And finally, moving on to the Mantis Bomber, which is just insane. This one guaranteed has crew teleporting as well. It can potentially have a med bay, which makes boarding super difficult if you're going to be doing that. And if you actually find the Mantis Aggressor, which is the Advanced Edition one, it can have a clone bay. So it really depends, but these things can be very difficult. They have a ton of weapon slots, and they can ruin a ship pretty quickly if they combine their boarding with a volley of weapons. You don't see them too often, to be fair. I think they're going to go in avoid if possible, especially this one. They're not much different, really, but I tend to find that these ships can be very dangerous. They have 4 weapons sometimes, I think, and they can ruin you with boarding. So I would probably avoid these if possible. Most of the time you don't really have a choice in avoiding things since it's like FTL, right? But I do think these ones are pretty difficult in my personal playtime. And of course, I don't think they have any. They don't have any augments, which is interesting. They don't get the Mantis pheromones, which is fair, I guess. They don't really need that. All right, now we move on to everyone's favorite category, the Rebel ships. So this is the Rebel Fighter, a very classic. The thing to keep in mind with Rebel ships, not the pirate ones, but the Rebel ones, is they only ever have humans on board. So it means there's nothing really special going on for a boarding party. So you can definitely keep that in mind if you're doing something boarding related. Looking at this one, it can have a med bay and it can have a teleporter. It does depend though. This is like the mid-tier one. This one tends to be a little easier, but we'll get to that in a minute here. I think these are mid-tier. Their weapons tend to be pretty bad. And you can usually, I like to get, I mean, everyone knows the layout of these rooms. It has the big square room, the little engine room in the middle, the oxygen room, the empty room, and then up here is the piloting, right? And you can get the beam that I always do through oxygen, shields, engines, and into weapons like this. And that's always satisfying. So you can get some pretty good damage on this. I think it's a... Honestly, no, I'm going to put it somewhat easy to fight. I don't really ever have that much problems with these. On the wiki right here, it has this ship with a mini beam and a heavy laser one. Exhibit A of just garbage weapon setup. So a lot of times you're going to find that, and it's not going to be a big deal. Same with the pirate one. Just a matter of what crew is swapped out. Pretty easy to fight compared to a lot of other ships, I would say. Look, dude, these ships are pretty easy. Now that I'm looking at them more, man. If they don't have boarding, which they don't sometimes, these ships are so trash most of the time. And if they have Mantis in it, they can't fix anything. Dude, I'm bumping these up. I'm going to bump this one up. Because this is the one that always has like one engine in it or some nonsense. And they like fix everything for the Mantis because the Mantis are completely incapable. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Looking at this, it says that there's a possibility of 0 to 2 NG just in the normal one. But even still, yeah. This one is pretty easy to fight most of the time if it doesn't have boarding. And even if it does, whatever. They usually, you find them early and they only send over like one Mantis anyway, so whatever, screw those guys. Okay, so the Rebel Rigger, which is this one, and the Pirate Rigger, tend to be pretty dang easy. It depends on the event, though, because if you find one that's just mad at you with a ton of drones, it can be kind of annoying. But sometimes you'll find like the Rebel Scout that doesn't want to fight, and they literally will just have a mini beam or something terrible like that. And yeah, they're trying to run, but they tend to be really, really bad. Not all the time, right? They do guarantee to have drone control, but depending on the drones, they can make themselves really, really bad. If you get the Advanced Edition, they can have hacking, but only optionally. So it depends. If you get that one, then it's a little bit more difficult depending on what they hack. I think this one, it's very variable. If you get the easy one that's running, you know, it's like here, right? But if you get the kind of annoying one, it's maybe in mid-tier. So I think I'm going to put it somewhat easy to fight. Same with the pirate one. These ones are not that bad. All right, moving on to the Elite Fighter. This one is a void if possible. This one pretty much only shows up if you dive, which you shouldn't be doing most of the time. I think it also shows up in like the very late sectors or the Rebel Stronghold, but most of the time you see this, it's in like if you dive. They don't have anything special. They can potentially have a teleporter, but they just have a ton of weapons, and it can be super annoying. They have a ton of crew. Like I said, the teleporter's a pain in the ass. The weapons can be just craziness. And if you have ASB firing on you in normal mode or harder, this thing is a nightmare. So try to avoid these. Try not to dive unless you absolutely have to. Okay. So moving on to the AI ships, some fan favorites. This is what I mean when I said earlier. There's only 2 types of drones. Like, they have different loadouts, but like I always thought there was more types of drones. I've been playing too much multiverse, I guess. But starting off, we got the Auto Scout, which is the tiny one. These ones actually can be kind of difficult. Boarding is a pain in the ass unless you have a very specific thing. They can potentially have cloaking. They also can potentially not have shields, which is nice and makes them really easy, especially if you find one in an asteroid field. That's actually hilarious. So it does vary quite a bit with these. I think I'm going to put them in mid-tier because sometimes, dude, you find these early on. They have shields, they have cloaking, they have like 3 weapons, and like one of them is a missile launcher or a bomb. And you're like, bro, what? Like, calm down. So this, again, it can be very easy depending, but I think the highs and the lows balance it out to about mid-tier. And the Auto Surveyor is pretty much the same thing, except it has mind control instead. Same deal. Cloaking, mind control are different, but they give you the same amount of annoyance in different ways. So I'm going to keep it right there in mid tier. Now the Auto Assault is pretty much everything about this, but harder. It guarantees has shields, and it guarantees has drone control. So it can be really annoying depending on your build. Not to mention it could be the Auto Hacker variant, which instead of drone control has hacking, also very annoying. And again, they can have a ton of weapons. I mean, I'm sure you guys know, you come into Sector 7 or something, 6 or 7, one of these pops up. He's got massive flat cannon, a missile launcher, a burst laser. That's halberd beam, bro. Like, that's not good. So these things I think are hard. Because they're drones, they're not, I don't know, they're still highs and lows. They can still be kind of easy randomly, but I think they tend to be hard. They tend to be not a good time, depending on what you get with them. And okay, nice. Onto the rock ships. So Rock Scout / the Pirate Scout, these two little baby ones right here. I love the ship designs of these ones, by the way. These are one of my favorite ships in the game, just how they look. So they have 2 to 5 rockmen, which can be annoying. All of the rock ships have rock plating, which can be super annoying, actually. It's always you need one more hit to kill them or something, and they resist it, and then they get another volley off, and then it's just all downhill. Rock ships tend to have a ton of missile weapons, as we all know, which can be really annoying because you can't do much about that unless you have cloaking or anti-drones, or you get lucky with your dodges, of course. But they can also have teleporters. Getting boarded by rocks is annoying. You can't really use fire strats against them. Boarding, like I said, not really that effective depending on how many there are. These little ones aren't quite as bad, so I think I'm gonna put them in mid tier. You know, especially if you get the pirate variant of this one here, it's not really that bad. So it does depend. And if you have cloaking, you can easily counter these ships because they only usually have one missile launcher or something like that. So these are not so bad. However, the rock fighters / rock instigators and pirate fighters, these ones can get pretty dangerous. The pirate one can have cloaking. I actually just learned right now. This one, the regular one, cannot have cloaking. Interesting. This one can, though. They can be pretty big. They don't have boarding yet, which is nice. But I think with cloaking, these things and missiles, combined with missiles, can be really dangerous. They cloak. You can't charge your weapons. You just kind of a sit and duck. They launch their missiles at you in a big-ass volley, and then they're already ready to go again. They can be difficult, I think. Even though this is the only one that can get cloaking, I'm gonna put this one in hard. This one is by definition less difficult. Like, without cloaking is a big thing for this. For the record, I think this one is more difficult than these ones, obviously, but I still think it's not that bad compared to this one. Like, yeah, this one can definitely be pretty difficult. Although, actually, okay, that's not quite true. Never mind. The Advanced Edition variant, this one, the wiki only has partial pictures, so I'm trying to piece it together. Actually, yeah, okay, whatever. I think they're both pretty hard. Even though I said, I think, despite having cloaking, this one's definitely more difficult. They're both pretty difficult. The missile launchers can just add up really quick, and they tend to have a lot of weapons. Okay, and finally we got the Rock Interceptor, Rock Assault. Yeah. Okay, I see. All right, it's all become clear. Sorry. There's a lot to take in on this wiki here. This one can be the Rock Interceptor, right? These are the Rock Fighters, but if it's the Advanced Edition, they're the Rock Interceptors or Pirate Interceptors. And and those ones can have cloaking and boarding. So yeah, these are definitely hard. Okay, my choice has been solidified. And finally, the Rock Assault / Rock Aggressor, depending on Advanced Edition or not, can have cloaking and boarding again. And it's huge. It's a massive ship. 4 weapon slots. It's just, this can be a real pain in the ass. The only thing keeping these ones a little bit higher is the fact that they're smaller and they don't have quite as many weapons. They usually only have 3. And, you know, if they're like 2 crappy burst lasers or something, then if you have enough shields, you're fine. Whereas having 4 weapon slots is a big game changer. So I think these are really, really annoying. Okay, and finally, well, not finally, never mind, there's more than one left. So the Slugs is up next. Slugs are interesting. These ones I love. So for anyone who doesn't know, there is a pilot room here. There's a shield room. There's a weapons room right here. There's an engines room, and there's an oxygen room. The oxygen room and the engine room does not have a door to the main one. So if you blow up the oxygen, you can just let these guys suffocate. It is incredibly satisfying and lets you get easy crew kills if you don't have a boarding strategy. So that alone makes me want to put them in easy to fight, and I think I will. These ships tend to be pretty crap. They have nothing special. They literally have no extra systems, just the usual. And that's pretty much it. The advanced edition one of the Pirate Scout can have mind control, but it's like you'll find these early on, and level 1 mind control is almost meaningless. So these are very easy to fight, in my opinion. They have slug repair gel for breaches, but like, who cares? It's not really that big of a deal, so whatever. All right, moving on to these boys. I'm surprised actually that 9 to 17. I guess so. Okay, these ones are called Slug Light Cruisers / Slug Light Surveyors. They, depending on whether you get the Advanced Edition variant or not, they can have either cloaking on the Pirate one or mind control on this one. They can be pretty bad. These ones tend to have, for some reason, slug ships tend to have a ton of slugs in them. Like 5 or 6. Yeah, it says 3 to 6 or 3 to 7 even slug crew. That's a lot of crew. So boarding strats can be really annoying. They can have a med bay, they can have a clone bay, everything. So you can't really, I mean, you can't board them. Slugs aren't crazy, but having so many, you can get ganged up on. There's a lot of things to consider when you attack one of these. I think these are, they could be, dude, the cloaking man. This one has mind control. I don't think that's quite as bad. I think the pirate one is actually worse here, low-key. Yeah. I don't know, man. It depends so much on the weapons, but these ones can have 4. Both these can have 4 weapons. Any ship that can carry 4 weapons at a time is super hard, in my opinion. Depending on what they get. Like, 2 weapons can be enough to take down your shield, like to hurt you a lot, depending on what they are. 4 weapons gives them such a higher chance of really damaging your ship. And having cloaking to just prevent you from doing stuff is super difficult. So yeah, I'm gonna leave this one slightly harder just because it's got that potential for cloaking. This one doesn't. The mind control is not quite as bad, so I'm rating it a little bit higher. All right, Slug Assault, which is this last one here. Pirate Assault, and then also they could be Slug Instigators or Pirate Instigators, depending on whether it's the Advanced Edition variant, if you will. These ones, especially the Advanced Edition, can be a nightmare. These ones can have, well, all of them can have cloaking, potentially. But they can, if they're the Advanced Edition ones, they can have cloaking and mind control. And that is a killer combo. That can really hurt you on the Slug Instigator. So I think this one is honestly pretty dang hard. And I think this one is just regular hard. The fact that this one can have cloaking and mind control potentially is insane. This one's not nearly as bad, just because not having the double combo. It's still hard, but not nearly as bad. And of course, again, they all have slug repair gel, but nobody really cares about that unless it's on your own ship. All right. Moving on to the last non-flagship type is the Zoltan cruisers, which again, there's only 2 like variants, right? Like, I don't know. I just thought there were more, but oh well. So the Energy Fighter is what it's called, / Pirate Fighter. Can also be the Energy Instigator and the Pirate Instigator. The biggest thing to consider is the Zoltan Shield. All of these, unless you're playing easy on Sector 1, have a Zoltan Shield. And that is just never good in any context. So all of these are hard because of that. These ones are not quite as bad. But the Zoltan Shield is enough to make them definitely hard, I think. It depends where you find them, but like, I don't know, dude. I feel like the Zoltan Shield is such a nightmare. Maybe these ones are mid-tier, though. Like, finding them so early on. Yeah, the Zoltan Shield's so annoying to fight. I'm going to put them in hard. And then these ones, dude, these ones have got to go in avoid if possible. Because, just because of, like, if they have good weapons, it takes 5 hits for you to take down the shields. A flak doesn't take their whole Zoltan shield down. A Burst Laser Mark II doesn't take their whole shield down. Like, you need so many weapons. You need a whole volley. And in FTL, one volley means a big difference. So if they have mind control, actually they can't get mind control. Never mind. If they have hacking, that's what I meant. If they have hacking or drone control, which they can get, that can be super annoying, especially the hacking. It can just really mess you up. So I think the Zoltan shields on these big boys right here is not worth your time. Unless 90% of the time you have to fight them anyways. But on principle, these things are really, really annoying. And finally, we move on to the flagship. So we have flagship phase 1, flagship phase 2, and flagship phase 3 because they're pretty much different ships. Well, they're all obvious. I mean, you can't avoid them. So let's just get that out of the way. But they are the hardest ship in the game in most contexts. The thing I will say is they are predictable. They don't change at all every run. You know exactly what to expect if you've been there before. But having said that, it's the flagship. This thing's crazy hard. In terms of the phases, I think it's a toss-up. Phase 1 is, well, I'm going to put them all down here because they're obviously all super hard. I hate that this has been done. There we go. Okay. So which one is the hardest, being on the left side? This is drone phase. This is cloak and hacking phase. And this is Zoltan shield phase. Zoltan shield phase is usually the easiest because they only have 2 weapons left. It's just a matter of getting the massive shield down. But if you made it this far, you probably are going to be able to do that. It's kind of a battle of attrition in a lot of ways. This is the easiest, I think. The first phase, dude, the drone phase might be the... they do board you on this final one, though. I think the drone phase might be the hardest. Because unless you use the hack scum, which I always do, you can't really hack them. If you have a drone build, you can't really do that. They have a defense drone. Well, you can kind of do it, I guess. I've been thinking about multiverse too much. But you get boarded by the thing. The drone burst can be super bad. I think the first phase, if they hack you in a bad spot like weapons or shields, it's really hard. But if you do get hacked in a bad spot like that, you should always jump away as a tip. Don't actually fight them. If you get hacked in your weapons or your shields, just yoink out of there and then come back, fight another day. So I think the second phase is the hardest, in my opinion, then the first phase and the third phase. And okay, there's our tier list. Again, this was all my opinion, and it's just impossible to actually judge these things because they vary so much based on their weapons and stuff like that. And like I said, so many of them are like, it could have cloaking, and if it does, it's hard. If it doesn't, it's easy. So this was mostly for fun. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate every single one of you guys. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great day.